Hi, this video is going to be is made as a message specifically to TYT, but also to a lot of other alternative and mainstream news providers, and it is offering a perspective, and I think it's very important that a perspective is lawful, okay, that it's based on actual solid facts and evidence and reality, and you can have a lot of perspectives on any particular issue, but where are what are the origins of those perspectives? Are some of those perspectives warped or even outright lies, because the lie or the warping serves some criminal interest of the person providing that perspective? And some perspectives are of use to certain consciousnesses, and so certain consciousnesses that would like to profit from exploiting people will support a particular perspective that is actually warped or twisted to the extent that it might make sense, but nonetheless it is fraudulent, because it's coming from a criminal consciousness that has offered a twisted perspective loosely based on the realities, the truths that serve that consciousness. So in that sense we can see how religions have been usurped, and how something like socialism has been usurped to create horrible dictators like Hitler and Stalin, but then on the other hand you've got like corporate capitalism with its extremism operating in the world today and their perspectives. But I'm trying to present a perspective from a lawful sense, okay? So I'm going to start with this extract from the Young Turks, which I will say I really appreciate the Young Turks. I think they've done brilliant coverage, especially on the Trump presidency, along with other matters. And but at the same time, I'm going to be offering some criticism here, which hopefully I hope you will take positively, because this is about really in confronting the true picture of what is going on in the world, which I think TYT are all about. And I think there is a certain humility there in accepting that maybe our original perspective, maybe we do need to tidy up a bit, and there's a strength in that humility as well, and then one is empowered then by the truth. And yes, this video might I think the further away somebody is from the truth and a correct understanding of global reality will perhaps find this my videos more offensive than positive. Though all I can say to those people is get with the truth, because the truth does contain a loving heart and forgiveness and trust and compassion, and that is the whole point of the truth. And the lies support the very opposite, and unfortunately people that thrive on those lies will keep supporting the perspective of those lies, but unfortunately they can only destroy a society from within, and that's what they do. And then from that vantage point they then attack other societies to destroy them from within as well. And we can see that is what is happening in the world today. So I'm going to start with this extract which is from the Young Turks, who I follow regularly and share their videos. So I'm just going to play a few minutes of this.
The entire world's military spending, over 200 nations, and we spent 36% of all the money, but not enough. Never enough. Never enough. So let's go to Trump explaining why we need more.
Just ensure that our courageous servicemen and women have the tools they need to deter war, and when called upon to fight in our name, only do one thing: win. We have to win. We have to start winning wars again. I have to say, when I was young in high school and college, everybody used to say, we never lost a war. We never lost a war. You remember. Some of you are right there with me, and you remember, we never lost a war. America never lost. And now, we never win a war. We never win. And we don't fight to win. We don't fight to win. So we either got to win or don't fight it at all.
Okay, I'm going to get past the normal.
So, you know, we've got Trump there, just totally confusing, contradicting himself, talking about how wars are to win. Well, first of all, in order to, before you start talking about war, it's important to understand the difference between a lawful war and an act of crime, terrorism. Because a war that isn't lawful is a terrorist. It's an act of terrorism, okay? It's a group of terrorists. And a war that is lawful, how is it lawful? What makes a war lawful? What makes it lawful is that the war is being waged and fought for just means. It is being waged against an attacker who wishes to deny a nation's independence and the people's human rights. Okay? That's a lawful war. A war that is being waged because, you know, the winners would like to engage in controlling the population and empowering people who would oppress and abuse the people's rights, and in order to loot that nation and profit from that war, then that is a criminal act. That's not a war, that's an act of terrorism. Okay? So when we're talking about wars, we're talking about, really, a lawful war is to protect and uphold people's human rights. That's what men like my grandfather gave their lives for. They believed in World War II, regardless of what agendas were going on behind the scenes. As far as people like my granddad believed, who willingly signed up, was he was fighting against an enemy that would, you know, rob British people and children of their rights and brutally occupy. So, Trump wants a historic increase in military spending. Now, as if there hasn't been an historic increase in military spending since 9/11. But let's forget about that. And also the $2 trillion that was lost in the Pentagon offices that got blown up. Okay, conveniently, on 9/11. So he wants this historic increase in military spending on a debt budget of trillions. So, you know, they're borrowing money to spend on the military. Simultaneously, he's cutting healthcare for millions of Americans. 20 plus million Americans will suffer directly, because it appears so far that his replacement plan is, if you've got the money, you've got access to healthcare. So, you know, that could be seen as a war, an act of economic terrorism, because at the, you know, flourish of a pen, millions of Americans could be left with no healthcare and actually condemned to die. So, you know, they're even being treated worse than convicts, because at least convicts have a trial before they get sentenced to death. You know, and this is deadly, deadly serious. And you know, the media and the alternative media need to sharpen up their act now. Okay, and one thing that, you know, we do need to understand is really get a proper definition of what a terrorist is. A terrorist is somebody who would deny your human rights. A terrorist operates by one law: do as thou wilt. And to people like Trump, the supreme narcissist, you know, which he is also a victim as well, you know, obviously he doesn't realise that yet, he thinks he's a winner, okay? But nonetheless, these extreme narcissists, they live by the law of do as thy will. Right, might equals right to them. And so human life is about a battle of wills. And the strongest shall survive, the strongest shall dominate. You know, the biggest and most powerful, the ones who've got the most followers. And obviously, you know, these people, a lot of them, narcissism does also include sadism. You know, people who actively enjoy hurting others. And such people do delight most in abusing children and babies, because they derive the most pleasure from inflicting terror and horror on the most innocent. Okay, that is part of their power trip. So, what is a terrorist? You know, and the thing is that you've got Donald Trump wanting now, you know, using terrorism to justify huge increase in military spending. And, you know, the media are very upset with Trump. And why are they very upset with Trump? Because, you know, he's not spinning them a silken yarn that they can credibly cover as intelligent reporters. Okay, like they could with the Obama administration. And, you know, when Obama decided to bomb Libya in support of who? The ISIS rebels. You know, and Gaddafi was really looking after his people. He'd done amazing, wonderful things for his people. And the fact is that the Middle East has been so politically unstable due to constant attack from, you know, covert attacks by America and the Zionist Israeli Mossad, okay, have been constantly trying to undermine the Middle Eastern countries. That, you know, those countries have often needed just one leader because they can't cope with the instability of keep changing leaders every 4 years, because they're under such heavy attack by Western powers, you know, that really don't want to see the population getting a share of their national wealth. They want that wealth to be kept in very few hands. Now, Gaddafi was providing national health care to his people, national education, social housing. You know, I mean, America couldn't even imagine receiving the things that the Libyan people were receiving. And even women, education for women and equal rights for women as well. Okay, and the forces that the West funded to stand against all of that were the antiquated people who, a lot of them, they're just abusers. They want to abuse women and children. They want power over women and children. They want the right to marry an 8-year-old girl or even an hour-old baby. These are what they want. And they're claiming that Islam supports that. When it does not, because Islam says live by new knowledge. And when you shine the light of new knowledge onto the scriptures, then you start to understand. You understand what is pollutant, what's rotten and needs to be removed, to be disregarded, and what's actual solid and what is actual fruit. Okay? And, you know, when it comes to interpreting religious scriptures or going from what's said in, say, for example, the Bible, I could show you a passage in the Bible that condones incest. So, you know, the Quran does say very, very clearly that Muslims need to live by new knowledge, okay, and abandon old ways and traditions, that new knowledge proves wrongs, which we know now women do have equal rights as well as women's rights because they've got a womb, okay, and we know that little girls aren't ready to be married, and the Quran also says there's not one holy book or prophet of Allah that is not polluted by shaitan, and it does not exclude itself from that either, you know. So what's that telling us? That's giving us some information that be aware as time goes by. Reread your scriptures and notice where the pollutants are. Clean up your act, because there are pollutants, and every pollutant is a problem within your society. It's a real problem, and the real problem in our society right now is this. You know, this is what the war needs to be waged against. Okay, because these people are waging a war against humanity, because the United Nations have listed organised crimes against children as a crime against humanity, and that means these people participating in organised crimes against children are terrorists. Now, Gordon Duff, the senior editor at Veterans Today, absolutely top guy, and, you know, he doesn't mess about. He presents true intelligence, and, you know, this is the story that he's explaining reality here. Largest paedophile ring in history, 70,000 members, heads of state, the rats scramble. That's just who they've uncovered. Who knows how many other connections go there? It's a wide, wide web. Okay, it's a wide, wide network. I'm not going to go through all this article, but, you know, he does refer to Justice Scalia, and he was, you know, Supreme Court Judge of America. You know, Justice Antonin Scalia. And, you know, it was discovered, there was evidence linking him to, you know, pedo-sadism, really. And according to this, some of the evidence presented here, it looks like he was murdered by a group of his own equally pedo-sadist friends in order to, you know, shut the whole thing up. And, you know, on the European end of the FBI investigation, the trail, all of which is easily followed by the breadcrumbs Sterling David Allen has left, leads to the highest and most powerful of the scientific communities, where blackmail, kidnapping and torture, threats against family, and in particular threats against children, have placed members of secret societies in positions of power at universities, think tanks, police and counter-terrorism agencies, and even the European Space Agency. So, you know, what we're being explained to here is that these paedophiles now have got so much power that they've actually even made it into outer space as an organisation. They've got control, what, of satellites? I mean, they've got control of everything, basically, through their connections in every authority, in every power. So that's the real terrorist threat that we are facing, that our children are facing, for a reality. And a lot of them, you know, especially the trafficked children that are trafficked from abroad into nations like America, you know, those children have no legal or biological representative. So therefore it is up to the people of that nation, okay, the lawful people, to accept that, alright, we don't know exactly who these children are, but we do know that thousands of them are coming in every year. We know that. So we are going to be vigilant, and we're going to investigate every single crime report that's even, there's a hint of child trafficking in it because of the insidious and secretive nature of that crime and the power that the perpetrators have, and how they're able to operate with impunity, with even protection from a Supreme Court judge and higher. So therefore we have to be really vigilant for this terrorist threat. Okay, because removing these people that are doing that, removing them from power, will drastically alter our planet. And maybe, you know, the American military won't be conned into supporting a load of paedophiles to take over countries like Libya and Iraq. because that is what is going on at the moment, and people are taking it at face value. You know, a criminal says, I'm a Muslim, and everybody then turns against Islam. That's absolutely ridiculous. A criminal could be a Christian, but it doesn't mean that that's all Christians. And they are using these, they're funding and creating these ISIS terrorists, you know, saying that they're Islamic, but they're not. They are purely people who support the law of do as thou wilt. And that can include Muslims, Christians, Jews, Democrats, Republicans. It can include everybody, because it cuts through all walks of life. That kind of consciousness that enjoys abusing children, you know, and such a consciousness will enjoy inflicting every kind of pain and horror on the whole of society. And they are like a cancer, which, as I say, it will die when the body dies, but then it's too late for the human body, isn't it? It's too late for the human child. So we do need to address this as a terrorist threat within every nation. And, you know, the way to address an entity like ISIS, say, that's moved into Iraq, you know, how can you protect innocent people from that entity when it's an occupying force within the country? So how can you bomb them without also killing the innocent people and hurting them that you're claiming to protect? And then there's always a risk that ISIS could win anyway, or there's some kind of peace deal made between ISIS, which then subjugates all the women and children back to antiquity, which Islam does not support. So, you know, they're just following do as thou wilt. They're not looking at the true facts and the true wisdom, you know. And people have said that, you know, the Quran is a very childish book and blah, 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 you know, and I don't care what you say. That child is telling the truth. That child tells the truth. Every religious text is polluted. And when you shine the light of new knowledge on it, you can see those pollutions very, very clearly, and we know where we've got to. We learn from the errors of our ways. And the truth is very accommodating to people that are prepared to accept that, yeah, I was misguided, I was misled, I misunderstood. Here you go, come on in. But there's some people that do understand, and they specifically choose not to. They choose to ignore because they want to abuse. They want to use. They want to live by do as thou wilt. They do not want to live by universal law of abundance and compassion that upholds human, women's, children's, men's, animals, earth rights. You know, and that is how we need to start addressing terrorism. That terrorism isn't Muslim, it isn't Christian, it isn't Democrat, it isn't Republican. It is just people that want to live by do as thou wilt without taking, you know, because they don't want to take into account the laws that give everybody their human rights. That means we have to live considerately and cooperatively. And do as thou will is a crime, especially if your will wants to abuse children. And that is what is happening in the world. You know, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's, as I say, when you get into this level, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia to a White House blackmail plot, it's really, really very, very serious. And we do need to understand where this terrorist threat is coming from. Okay? And the only way, you know, Trump's idea of, you know, going bombing ISIS in the Middle East with all the massive weapons he's going to buy and feeding, you know, the war profiteers, he isn't going to be helping America in any way apart from killing off their sons and daughters in his wars that he thinks they should win, and also killing off the public at home by removing the money that could be spent on healthcare, instead putting it into the military to fund people who want to live really like he does by do as thou wilt. and he will do as his will, and we'll see who wins, because, that's what the world is, a big playground, and it don't matter if we trample on a few kids and babies and women while we're fighting. It don't matter if we demolish whole societies while we're having our do as thy wilt battle between who's going to have the biggest wilt. What? So, we do need to get a grip and look at facts and information. Now, as I say, one of the things that's disturbing me now is Pizzagate. And it's the fact that a lot of the alternative media, the most credible ones, like the Young Turks, you've not picked up on it. I understand why you've done that at the moment, but I'm giving you the new perspective here. And the perspective is that there is lawful evidence presented in the WikiLeaks Clinton and Podesta emails. It's FBI-supported evidence that relates to serious crimes, organised crimes against children and child trafficking. Organised crimes against children equals crimes against humanity equals terrorist groups. And you're not covering it. The mainstream media isn't covering it. He who, was prepared to accept the WikiLeaks emails when it came to stuff about Hillary Clinton and him winning a presidency on it, he's ignoring the rest of the evidence contained in those emails. Okay? And he's telling the media that they're presenting fake news, and yet at the same time, the news, like Pizzagate, that the media is saying is fake news, he's refusing to investigate it and accept it as real news then. So, I ask all you Trump supporters who keep supporting Trump in his condemnation of the media about fake news, why isn't he bothered about the news then that the media is saying is fake? And the fact is that he's equally implicated. His name's circled in red in Epstein's book that was given to authorities by a prominent member of Epstein's staff, and him, along with the Clintons and about 5 or 6 other names that were circled in red, were reported as the most prominent members, and they are key to the core of the whole pedo-sadist ring that they were a part of. Now, because the Young Turks aren't following this, and a lot of the mainstream media, but a lot of the Trump supporters are heavily talking about Pizzagate and asking questions. So now the mainstream media, and it looks like the alternative media as well, have dismissed it all as, an anti-democrat campaign being launched by Trump supporters. I'm sorry, you can't hide behind that wall. And in doing so, you are leaving children at risk, and you're supporting a narrative which is saying that socialism and Democrats, these are the paedophiles, these are the pedo-sadists, all Democrats, all socialism. That's what's created this. That's the narrative that's being put forward, that women's rights to planned pregnancy is part of, the sadistic democratic, the Satanist democratic agenda, the socialist agenda. It's Satanist. This is a pack of lies, and this is a twisting. This is exploiting even further what is going on, because we know for a fact that it isn't only blooming Democrats and socialists, who actually probably form the minority of these sadists when you really look at the full picture of it. And we know that the Democrats aren't really true Democrats, because otherwise Obama would never have agreed to go and bomb Libya, and, Hillary Clinton laughing at the sadistic, horrible, disgusting, dreadful death that was inflicted against Colonel Gaddafi, and the horror that happened to the Libyan people after that, okay? And the state of Libya right now, she could sit and laugh about that. Because, they were all laughing. because, you know, they didn't want Gaddafi's, him to set up his Bank of Africa. And so what they did was they went and armed and supported and trained a load of terrorists, extremists, religious extremists, to destabilise the country from within. Okay? And say, we want democracy. And then America runs in, oh yeah, we're defending ISIS's rights to democracy. But all the members of ISIS wanted, you know, Americans can say the Muslims, but they're not Muslims. All those members wanted was to return to antiquity and to go against the teachings of the Quran that says you have to live by new knowledge. Those people were angry that, you know, Libyan women were being educated, that they had rights. They were angry that, you know, they weren't being allowed to marry 8-year-old girls. That's the real terrorism that's going on. And he talks about fake news. He talks about he says to the media, I'm not listening to you. You only report fake news, but the media that the news has said is fake, he isn't looking at. Because they're all implicated, and this goes very, very high. It's a very serious thing. And as I say, you know, it does relate to 9/11, because the kind of people who can do things like that to children have got no qualms whatsoever about committing an act, committing an act like 9/11 and blaming it on innocent parties. And, you know, that is what the Trump administration, they've done throughout their campaign, and to this very day, they play the victim while committing the crimes. And it's your typical narcissist approach. You know, they will constantly suspect, accuse, you know, their non-adulterous partner of doing the very thing that they're doing. You know, committing adultery. And they'll be possessive, jealous, paranoid, okay? But actually, it's them that are committing the crime. The non-adulterous partner is at risk from that person who's constantly suspecting and accusing and trying to own and control. And that is why we have a law, is to protect us from that kind of mentality that wants to own and control us and dictate to us. But not for our protection, not for our benefit, but for them and their cronies' benefit. And as I say, when he talks about, you know, the people, he's talking about the corporate people. They're the only people he recognises as people. All the other people, the corporation recognises stock. People have to understand that. And, you know, to Trump supporters, you know, I'm not dissing you. I understand why a lot of people, you know, I do empathise. But at the end of the day, if this guy has such a problem with fake news and wants to cover the real news, then why isn't he covering the news that the mainstream media has said is fake? And also the mainstream media and none of the alternative media has the lawful right to ignore the WikiLeaks emails, and especially in relation to the Podesta brothers, okay, because it involves trafficked children and crimes against children, and it's organised, and it's a crime against humanity. So it doesn't matter how we arrived at that information, it doesn't matter where it came from. At the end of the day, the information tells us children are at risk, and we have a lawful, ethical and moral responsibility, therefore, to investigate. You know? And you know, even a guy going into somebody's house fixing their computer, if he saw images of child pornography on that computer, you know, he's got a lawful and moral obligation to go and tell the police, and that has happened. Okay? And, you know, as I say, when it comes to crimes against children, it doesn't matter how the information was leaked, whether it was obtained legally or illegally, or what purposes it was meant to be used for, whether it was, you know, taken to be used in a sort of malicious way, which was to influence the presidential vote. But still, that regardless of any of that, the information has exposed that children are at risk, and it's exposed the crime of child trafficking, which is so insidious and secret, and which we know millions of children and babies are suffering every single year. And so we have to be very, very vigilant, because they have got no voice whatsoever, and the people controlling them are so powerful that they can be a Supreme Court judge. So we have a duty and responsibility for those children as compassionate citizens. As soon as a trafficked child enters our country, they are a ward of our nation. And what is a nation except its people? And what kind of people are we if we cannot have a heart and be vigilant for known crimes against very vulnerable children? So, you know, that's why this is my appeal to the Young Turks, to please look at this perspective, the way I've presented it, you know, the lawful perspective. The UN Child Protection reports, they're not fake news, they're real, and they present solid evidence based on solid studies and solid facts by people who really looked at this crime. And that's why, you know, the only way to combat terrorism in this world is to understand that the terrorists, regardless of what they call themselves or what political party, the terrorists are the law. They support the law of do as thou will, okay? And it is the duty of every human to protect the child with universal law and to establish, you know, EU-style UN child protection directives, fully establish them, fully implement them, and, you know, fully police this crime now, because it is a crime against humanity. It's an act of terrorism against humanity. It's attacking the developing child, okay? And we have a lawful duty to address that and to accept, you know, that that is what we're dealing with all these terrorists and the profiteers, the corporations that are thriving on them as well, because, you know, a lot of child abuse, money earned through child abuse, is legitimised through setting up businesses which launders the money, and those businesses are paying taxes and they're paying interest rates to bankers. So, you know, this multi-billion dollar industry is filling a lot of pockets, and it is related to drugs. And as I say, how are we going to pay for policing and policing crimes against children, particularly organised crimes against children? How are we going to fund that? I say we fund it by getting rid of prohibition against illegal drugs. Okay, just get rid of that prohibition. You know, obviously put things in, they can't be sold to under 18s and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, get rid of prohibition and put all the funding and efforts into instead arresting these suspects. And, you know, we do need to look at new ways of establishing society. And as I say, you know, Colonel Gaddafi had a good plan for Africa that was going to do well for African people. And just as Americans have got a right, as their United States, to develop a good plan to help those people. But no matter what that plan is, it has to be lawful, and it can never include invading other countries on dubious grounds, even on lies, and, you know, not to be coming from any realistic or accurate perspective. And, you know, this is an accurate perspective that I've shared here. That is what is going on. We're fighting do as thy will, might equals right. And they are standing against universal law of abundance and compassion. Right equals might. So we have to show them that right does equal might. And it doesn't matter what crimes they commit. The righteous will always pick up on the truth and the facts and the evidence, and they will always, regardless of how they came about those truths and facts, take steps to protect children if those facts and evidence and truths support the lawful suspicion that children are at risk. Okay, and now that is the fact of Pizzagate, and I don't care which way you want to step around that issue. We need to address it, and we need to address this issue of crimes against children. So thank you very much for listening. Love and strength to all, and God bless.